Hello everyone, welcome to Village in the City, call number 8, and we're very excited this month to have Jenny Bimpson from the Chatty Cafe Scheme as our special guest. Jenny, welcome to Village in the City.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, lovely to have you here, and welcome to everyone else who's joining us live on the call, and of course, well, hello to everyone who's watching the recording later on. So just to take a moment to introduce Village in the City before we talk to Jenny. Village in the City is a project to help encourage everyone to create micro-local communities where you are, particularly in urban settings. And I'm leading that and creating a community here in the West End of Edinburgh, which had almost no community activity before the COVID shutdown, but has started to develop it in rather interesting ways. And our project is to produce resources and support and connection and ideas and help for anyone wanting to improve their micro local community, which may only be a street or two, or it might be a little patch of a town. It's probably less than a town. And there's all sorts of resources on the website, villageinthecity.net. One thing that I'm particularly excited to share with everyone, which is also on the website, is that we have now, I did a TEDx talk before Christmas, which is now online. So I've put the link to that in the chat, but if you go to the website, you'll find it, or Google Village in the City TEDx, you'll find that. And big thanks to Richard, who helped to organize that. And it's about 9 minutes. It's packed with how the project came about and what we're doing and how it's getting on. So that's Village in the City. And today we're going to focus on this idea of the Chatty Cafe Scheme and how that is a very simple but interesting and effective way of helping to create connections and community. So, and Jenny, welcome. Jenny's not going to give a talk as such. We're going to have a chat. That's how it's going to work. And there'll be definitely time for questions. And then we'll have a little breakout room session so you can say hi to each other and talk about what we're learning before the end of the hour. So Jenny, do you want to tell us a little bit about how Chatty Cafe started and how it got underway?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's my sister Alex. She just had a baby and she was in the local cafe in the supermarket in our town. And she was sat at a table with the baby in the car seat. And she just thought, she was sat there on her own, a bit fed up with a cup of tea. And when she looked around the cafe, she saw other people that looked like they felt like she did. So there was an elderly gentleman sat a bit sad on his own, and there was an elderly lady on her own. There was a carer and who she cared for on their own, and they looked like they'd run out of conversation. And she just thought, what a shame we're not all sat at the same table having a chat. And she kind of mulled this over for about a year and didn't really do anything with it. And then family all said to her, you know, give it a go. So she printed off some posters and went to a few cafes in our town and said, would you think of having a table in your cafe that would have a sign on it that would say, if you want to talk to other customers, sit here. And they all jumped on board. And she was quite shocked, really. So that was 2017, and we now have over 1,400 venues across the UK, Australia. We've got some in Poland and Canada and Gibraltar, and it's still growing. So, you know, it's a really simple idea. A venue will pay to join, and we send them a pack so that they can then put a poster up and put the table stand on the table and window sticker. And people are getting used to the fact that when they go into a cafe, they see that table. If they feel like having a chat in that moment, they can go and sit there. If they don't feel like it, they don't sit there, you know. And we say stay 5 minutes or stay longer. It's not about lifelong friendship. It's not about swapping numbers. It's just about having a chat in that moment over a cup of tea.
Right, and so the idea is that there's a Chatty Cafe. If a cafe signs up, there's always, it's the kind of thing, it's always there. It's not at a certain time of day or
well,
a day of the week. How does that work?
Yeah, it's completely up to the venue when they want to have their Chatter and Natter table available. Some venues have it available all day, every day. Others maybe not on a Saturday because they're really busy, or they might have it every morning. It's completely up to them.
And what do you find? Is there a kind of common way of doing it, or
The majority have it available all the time, to be honest, when we've we've spoken to them. People do say that when they first go in and they see that sign on the table, they're a bit reticent about it, a bit, what's that? And nobody wants to be the first person to sit there. But in venues where it's more established, and especially if the staff understand the concept, people go, what's that? Well, if you want to talk to somebody else, sit there, really simple. It does really well, and people tend to always sit at that table then. But it's and that is why we were taking on lots of volunteers to go and sit at those tables to help get the conversation going, because one thing we have found is that depends how confident you are, but a lot of people don't want to be the first person to sit there, do they? I think we can all understand that.
Absolutely, that's really interesting. So the volunteers, does the cafe find the volunteers? Do you?
No, we do it. We've already taken, I think, we've got about 140 on board now. And what they're doing for us at the moment, because obviously COVID happened and all our venues shut in the UK, and it was, how on earth do we reach those people experiencing loneliness and social isolation now with all these venues closed? So we then started up offering one-to-one calls. That's a weekly call to someone experiencing loneliness. And we took on volunteers to make those calls. We received the referrals from social prescribers across the UK. So somebody goes to the doctors, they say, I'm feeling lonely. The doctor doesn't want to go down the medication route. They speak to the social prescriber, what's in the community, what can we offer this person? And they then send a referral form to us, and we get a volunteer to call them every week at the same time, so that person's got that routine and that structure to their week. But those volunteers making those calls, we're hoping when venues do reopen, we'll direct them to their local cafes to go and sit at the table. That's the plan.
Absolutely. And so you mentioned there, obviously, that the lockdowns that we're all in around the world are having an effect on this. How have you been sort of keeping going and keeping the idea alive through that?
Simply these one-to-one calls. I mean, when we first thought of doing them, that was last March, I took on the first 13 people. I just don't know how many we thought we were going to get. We're now in the hundreds of referrals. But we then, from the 13 that I spoke to from all across the UK, and I rang them every week for 8 months until I needed to be doing full time helping the volunteers. A lot of these people get referred. They were experiencing loneliness prior to COVID, and they still will be after it. They're housebound for medical reasons, and they haven't got access to technology, so they can't come on. We do virtual Chatty Cafes on Zoom 3 times a week, but they can't access those. These people will still want these one-to-one weekly calls way beyond COVID, and that's why we've applied for funding. We've had some through to continue them as long as we can.
And Jenny's written in the chat box that this is a wonderfully British idea for a particularly British dilemma about introducing oneself to strangers. And I can connect to that, but I'm wondering what your experience is. Is it a British thing, or what? Because you have quite an international dimension to this movement as well.
Yeah, I mean, we were just we'd only just gone into Poland when COVID happened, as Richard will testify. We've just gone into Australia just at the beginning of lockdown, and they've had it very bad over there, as you know. So it's all a bit difficult to work out. But for instance, in Australia, whereas in England we have a chatter and natter table, because the word natter is very well known, but it means nothing in Australia. They're calling it a have a chat table. So it's still part of the Chatty Cafe, but we realise, and different things mean different things in different countries. So we're very prepared to change it slightly so people understand it.
And do you find? So what's the experience of the cafes who join the scheme? I mean, obviously it must be worth it in some regard to them? Why do what do they get out of it, do you think?
Well, some join because, you know, maybe there's a big incentive in a big push in the area where they are, their town, to help loneliness and social isolation. So they join because of that. Others join word of mouth, it's been recommended. But what they do tell us when we've conducted impact reports is that people tend to stay at the table longer because they've got somebody to talk to. They might buy an extra coffee because they're chatting. They might buy a cake. So it can help increase footfall at the venue. You know, a lot of our cafes, certainly on the high street in the UK, are struggling. So, you know, they said it did help that. Some venues would say they designated one table, but there were so many people around it, they had to knock two together. And it stopped so many tables only having one person sat at them, which was better for the cafe. So, yeah, there was a financial incentive for the cafes that when Alex dreamt this up was never in her head. You know, it wasn't about that. It was about just connecting people.
Absolutely. But you can see how, you know, in a way it's an attraction for people both to come to the cafe and potentially stay longer. So, and that, I guess, helps with spreading it, because if there's something in it for the cafe, even a small thing,
yeah,
that's going to be a help.
Yeah, I mean, we've all been to cafes as well, and everyone's on the laptops and phones, aren't they? I mean, we all do it. But if you're someone who hasn't spoken to anyone for a few days, you know, that can be quite disheartening. Sometimes you just want a simple chat, even if it's only about the weather.
Jenny, your story reminds me, and this goes back quite a few years. I was in San Francisco on business, and not knowing how to navigate the town very well, I arrived at where I had an appointment awfully early, about an hour early. And I thought, well, I can either sit here in my car. This was before I had cell phones and technology. I could sit here in my car, or I'd look for a place I can go inside. And I drove around and I found a little neighborhood restaurant. And I went in and sat down and sat at a table by myself, drinking a cup of coffee. And I don't know, probably was reading or something. And I noticed a couple in the middle of the restaurant sitting across from each other. They both had newspapers held up. Like today, they would be on laptops or mobile phones, but they both had the newspaper. But as people came into the restaurant, this was early in the morning, it was still dark outside, they would drop their papers and they would chat with the folks, and then they would sit down nearby. And before long, that part of the restaurant was full of local people talking. There was a fellow that brought his, and I was listening in on all these conversations. There was a fellow that brought his daughter in, and she was going off to school that day, and or, you know, later that morning. And so this was their time together. There was another fellow that, you know, worked nearby but lived somewhere else in San Francisco, and he sat down and talked. And I wrote a story about it. I'll share it a little later, but it was a fascinating experience. And one more quick thing, I live in Nebraska, which is very, for the most part, very rural state. And you go in any small town, almost any small town across our state, and there is a large table, larger than most of the rest of the tables, and it's where the locals sit down when they go in, so they don't want to sit by themselves. Oh, and that's very common
in the UK. We wouldn't have that. That's really that's just a natural thing there, isn't it? Obviously.
Yeah. So almost any restaurant you go in, early in the morning especially, there will be people there sitting over coffee, having maybe a bite of breakfast and talking. So it's kind of a common thing. And Richard tells me he's going to come out and experience this himself. I'm going to put him in a car and I'm going to point him to 3 or 4 small towns in Nebraska and say, just go sit there and see what happens.
Yes, I think it'd be fascinating, because it's one of those things, particularly the British, I think, you know, talking to other people, you need a scaffolding to help you to do it. And that's why there was an excellent book called Watching the English by Kate Fox. And she's an anthropologist who examined the English rather than natives in mud huts somewhere. And she correctly worked out that we always ask about the weather because it's a safe question.
Oh, yeah, well, we do too.
When you say, oh, it's a lovely day, isn't it? It's really, you're saying, will you talk to me?
Yeah.
Because any response to that is okay, including no response.
That's true here in the United States as well.
Yeah,
We've got some comments coming in the chat, and it's a small group today. So rather than me, I can read them out, but I very invite people who put comments in the chat or questions in the chat to start to jump in if you'd like to. So welcoming comments, thoughts.
Yeah, maybe I'll just jump in, Jenny, and say that I was quite instrumental in trying to approach cafes here in Krakow in Poland to get this going, and the cafe manager was sort of, yeah, you can try it if you like, but they weren't so engaged, and one of them put the sign away after a while, and I had a feeling that if you're trying to get it going, it might be a very good idea to sort of maybe just go for a particular time slot, and suppose anyone on this call is trying to make the cafe into a local sort of community centre, as it were, then maybe say, well, we'll do it on Wednesday mornings, like in the TV series Fleabag or something. So I'll be there just to sort of try and get it going. And I don't know whether you've ever, because I feel like getting it started is a bit hard. Once it's up and running, it's fine, but getting it started was quite tricky. And do you have any ideas or suggestions based on a sort of wider experience of the best way to get them started?
Well, I mean, we did look at creating Chatty Wednesdays, and then we looked at creating Chatty Mondays, because a lot of people have been alone all weekend and would want somewhere to go. And we thought, well, if we just said to venues, you can have it whenever you want, but could you commit to this particular day and time so people know it is always on then? It's not that simple. A lot of cafes shut on a Monday in the UK, but also a lot of cafes close on a Tuesday in the UK. They don't close on a Monday, we discovered. And we're not just for cafes, we're for all venues. We've got pubs that have joined, community centres, libraries. So their hours are very different as well. So we did struggle with that. And we just find that if the people that work in the venue are behind it, like you said about that cafe, so the manager doesn't sound that positive about it, or instantly didn't think it would work, it tends not to. For instance, I mean, Costa Coffee, as you know, Richard, got behind us very early on, and it's in 440 of their stores in the UK. And it's just going into Waterstones, Marks and Spencer's, Waitrose cafes. They're all partners that work there. So it does fantastic there because everyone working in the cafe is behind it. And that just makes a huge difference.
So, and how did that happen? Was that because it's part of the, so that's a big national chain, right? And I thought you were going to say, because it was a chain, they weren't so engaged, but was that part of their staff training, or so did they sort of
just that I think the demographic that go to that particular store is good for the Chatty Cafe. A lot of people who live alone and go out to go shopping, but then want to go for a coffee, but then do want to have a chat. So yeah, it does. And they've all approached us, all those, those big multinationals. They've come to us wanting to join the scheme. So yeah, but then COVID happened, so we've halted yet again.
Yeah. So how widespread is it in the UK? Can you say how many there are? How many?
About 1,400 across the UK. Obviously, during COVID, we were having probably between about 80 venues a month join up pre-COVID, and that's obviously, we haven't really got new sign-ups. All we've got is people repeat staying with us, which is great because a lot of these venues are closed. The fact that the staying with us is wonderful.
Sue, is that your hand up?
It is indeed.
And then
yes.
Sasha after that. So
really,
Sue, go for it.
Really interested in this, and particularly your mention of libraries and how libraries are getting involved. I'm a retired health librarian, and we're looking at the moment with pieces of work to take the paradigm of libraries away from culture into well-being. And I guess your thing is sitting within that well-being stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've had a lot of boroughs of councils throughout the UK join up all their libraries. Another thing to know is that tables do quite well if people are doing something around the table. So some venues will do an arts and crafts or a book club. I know libraries have always veered towards that, and that does help because we all know that it is a fact, if you're doing something, you do tend to find it easier to chat. It's a little bit more natural because all the concentration isn't on the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Sasha, you had a question.
Hi, Jenny. I've actually spoken to you before because when I first heard about you, I don't think I realised you did Chatty Cafes. I was referring someone one-to-one to you.
Oh, right.
And at the same time, I heard about Meetup Mondays. So my first question, I've got three. Is it like Meetup Mondays, or how are you different to Meetup Mondays?
To be honest, I don't know that much about Meetup Mondays. Are they not just in a certain area in the UK?
Well, I think it's a bit like you. It's a concept which can be rolled out sort of anywhere. So I'm down in Devon, and
yeah, I thought it was. Yeah, it's just in an area in Devon, I think.
No, I think Meetup Mondays started up north.
Oh, right,
across
right.
the country.
Right.
I'm in Devon, and I started this coffee group with me and another lady, and we wanted to find someone to take ownership of it. And so Meetup Mondays was looking sort of good. The thing that was sort of against us at the time was that their policy looks at the cafe owner sort of providing free beverages, and because it was sort of through the pandemic, those kind of organisations are struggling. We felt that was sort of awkward. But anyway, so that's I just wanted to know if you were connected. So that's fine. The other thing is, you told me, or your colleague, is it Anna?
Abby,
yeah. Was telling me that you've got a couple face-to-face ones, for obviously pre-COVID, in Marlborough and Salcombe here in Devon. So I wondered, but I couldn't find them, and I'm wondering, do you have a map of them? Is there any way of finding out where the Chatty Cafes are?
Yes, if you go on the website and it will say find my table, you put in either your town or your postcode, and it will bring up within a 25-mile radius all the venues signed up to the scheme near you. And you can make that radius smaller if you just want to look within 5 miles. We are actually just going live with a new website in a few weeks when we've transferred all the data over. We've not been happy with our website for a while, and we want it to be extremely user friendly for, you know, a lady in her 80s. We also want it to be user friendly for a venue that wants to join up, and you know, for people who want to volunteer. And we've just spent about the last 3 months redesigning it all. So do feel free to look on now, but the new website will also pinpoint on a map everywhere that they are, and then you can just click on the map and it will bring up that venue's details.
Okay, wonderful. And last question, because we're looking, so the group that we set up, it's currently online, we've got about 10 active members and 15 people that come up on a Monday and Thursday afternoon for coffees. Going forward, we want to take it back offline, and if we wanted to sort of start up, I've got 2 venues in 2 areas in mind. Do you sort of provide support in terms of a roadmap, a sort of plan how to get it off the ground in terms of what you've already done? Yeah,
I mean, if you wanted to sign up an actual venue, is it you found a venue where you'd like it to be? Yeah, that venue can join online. That's £20 a year per venue, and then they get the pack with everything they need to get going. And we, you know, we would advertise that across our social media for you as well. So we, you know, we would be there to support you in doing that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sasha. Lara has been putting some interesting things in the chat about happy to chat benches, and also the German concept of a Stammtisch. Lara, would you like to share some of that with us out loud, please?
Sure. Yeah, I'm just thinking about the fact that, you know, not depending on where you live, you might not have the luxury of a local cafe or a pub. Certainly here, they seem to close. The remaining ones are now seem to be going as well. So there's less and less places actually for people to meet. So another alternative, and I think there are quite a lot of examples of these across the UK, are happy to chat benches, which is, I think, a very similar concept. It's just, it happens to be outdoors and on a wooden bench. And it's something that I think we might do in our neighbourhood, and is probably quite simple to do as well. So that was just a suggestion for people. And then the Stammtisch, it's just a really nice concept. It's this idea of a regulars table in a cafe or a bar, quite often centered around an interest or an activity. I know that Richard maybe given some examples of, crafts or whatever the interest or activity was, but actually a community Stammtisch, I think, would be a really nice thing. A table at a regular time and place, so you knew when to turn up, would work quite well. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Lara. Great to have you with us today. Richard, did you have a TEDx about happy to chat benches or something like that in one of your recent events?
Yes. I mean, I posted a link to Alex's, that's Jenna's sister's TEDx talk, and there was another project from someone called Alison Owen Jones in Cardiff. I'll post a link after I finish speaking so I can focus on what I'm saying, which is probably a good idea. And Alison had the idea of labelling up benches in her local town. She saw one, it was very similar. She saw a guy on the bench looking lonely, and her dog rushed up and was chatting to it. And the man looked as if he might want to chat, but she didn't think it was appropriate, and then she thought, wouldn't it be great if, and put a sign called the Happy to Chat. She called it a Happy to Chat bench and just put her own sign on it. And then someone tweeted it on their local social media, and it got 300 retweets or likes or whatever you have on Twitter. So she went around the whole of Cardiff putting signs on the benches. And of course, because of COVID, it's closed down. But I think that, it's all part of the same, just finding ways of making it easy to know that someone's happy to chat, because someone might not feel like having a chat, and so so people feel that hesitancy, and so just removing that friction is a very good idea. And in fact, Maya, who's on the call somewhere, I can't see you. Maya, you can wave. Maya's checking what the situation is in her town to see where the benches are and what the local authorities would say, the local government would say about doing the benches. But I have a kind of vision that, in a local area, which could be a village in the city, there'll be different things, and like having a Happy to Chat bench, having a Chatty Cafe, having a community notice board. There are a number of different things, and they also mutually reinforce each other, don't they? That because like some people might be library people, other people might be cafe people, other people might be more like sit in the park type people, if you know what I mean.
Thank you, Richard. Nick, hello, Nick. Reverend Nick has just posted that in Pennycook we have, not in COVID times, an open house in the town hall with several tables for people practicing different languages. I want to have another table for a range of topics once we can meet again, including death cafe type topic every now and then. Very, very interesting. Yeah. So lots and lots of, thank you, Nick. So lots of different ways of offering this little framework for people to come together so they can do it without embarrassment and whatever. Before we just go into our breakout rooms to say hi to some people and talk about what we've been hearing, any other questions for Jenny right now? I think I'm looking at everybody there. In that case, let me open up some breakout rooms. So it'll be about three or four people per room, just for 10 minutes. Just say hi, say hello, talk about where you are, talk about what interests you about chatty cafes and the concepts that relate to that, and how it might connect with your area and so forth. So I'm going to open up the breakout rooms now. You'll get an invitation on screen just to click to join the room, and 10 minutes, and then we'll come back together again to discuss what we've been thinking about and have any questions for Jenny. So off we go to the rooms. Welcome back from the chats and the breakout rooms. So there's an opportunity now if anyone would like to share things that have popped up in the conversations, and indeed any more questions for Jenny, or for indeed anything else that's relevant. Ed, Paul, yes.
Yeah, we were just talking about building community in a specific area, and Jenny was saying that we could set up a virtual chatty chat room for just our area, and she would come and give us some help with that, which I thought was quite a good thing for community building, which I know that you're interested in, Mark, particularly. And the other thing that came up in our group was we were chatting about volunteers, and there's a need for, they've got a waiting list for people to chat. So if you want to volunteer, or know somebody who wants to volunteer, there's a need for more volunteers at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that.
We've got 18 people waiting for calls at the moment. It tends to fluctuate around the 20 mark. They come in faster than I can cover volunteers for them. So if yourself or anyone you know would like to make weekly calls, it's only 30 minutes a week we ask for. We're very grateful. Okay,
is there an email address or some way people
can
get in touch?
It's on the website, but it's just Jenny at the Chatty Cafe Scheme.co.uk.
Great, excellent. Well, folks, that's one for us, but also one to maybe share around if you know people who enjoy that sort of thing and would like a way of, thank you, Richard, sharing the email address there to get involved. So certainly it's a great way of helping out that we can all tackle, I think. So that's the good thing about it. It all feels very approachable, this kind of operation, I think. Richard.
So I was going to share something that Jody was describing. He's Italian but based in Bolivia, and he was saying that there are sort of meetings like the language exchange meetings in his city, and also he's got a sort of informal conversation club, and this is really sharing an insight. We're reflecting that in areas where there are a lot of tourists, this might be quite an attractive thing for a venue if you're looking for an argument why a cafe might be interested in this. If you've got people in town like Randy when he was in that other town in the United States, that for people who are passing through, they can't know locals, so it's particularly interesting for, and it's not just for the local community, it's for people who've just arrived or are passing through. It could be quite nice. And I suppose you in technology, you call it different use cases. You've got different potential beneficiaries of these things for different times.
Absolutely, thank you. That's a good point. Actually, Paul, I let you into a secret, folks. Paul here on the call is also here in the West End of Edinburgh. So one of my kind of colleagues, or I'm one of his colleagues, working together in our little corner of Edinburgh. So and that's very nice to have that start as well. Other thoughts?
I see Paul again.
So Paul again, yes.
Yeah, another thing we touched on was benches. And I just wondered if anyone had experience of actually sticking a label on a bench, and what the bench owners, which in Edinburgh would be the council, think of that.
I can share. I know Alison, who did this project in Cardiff, and it was quite funny that after she did her benches, someone from the local council was removing them, and her son is a politician in the city town council or the city council. I'm not sure what level of government it was, but he made a speech in the local town council about how outrageous it was that his mother's signs were being removed, and basically she had the attitude, put them up and what's the worst that can happen is someone will take them down, which I think in normal times would be fine, possibly a bit risky in the COVID time. But we're also talking to a street furniture manufacturer about whether they might make a special bench that has a special place for the sign. And if you look at her TEDx talk, which I posted a link to, there are photographs, and sometimes there are very nice sort of permanent signs, and other times they're temporary. So I think, all other things being equal, if you talk to the bench owner, but if you just want to get it going, you can what's the word? You can just sort of do it as a temporary thing and see what happens. And in Ireland, there's this project called the Buddy Bench Scheme, which is for lonely school kids, which is much more complicated because you have to, where it's a special bench for school children, but you have to have, everyone has to be on board, like the teachers and the parents and the kids and the local education authority. And, there's also, you need to do it really carefully with a timetable so that if you don't get a kid who sits on the bench being stigmatized and teased or bullied, then you can get them out. And, there's also, you need to do it really carefully with a timetable so that if you don't get a kid who sits on the bench being stigmatized and teased or bullied, then you can get them out. And, there's also, you need to do it really carefully with a timetable so that if you don't get a kid who sits on the bench being stigmatized and teased or bullied, then for being lonely. So, you know, I say I wouldn't start with the school, but there is an Irish scheme.
Yes.
I actually have to leave now because I'm hosting a TED Circle. I'm just going to post a link to TED Circles because they're a useful idea for, that's like a book club around TED Talks. But I would say, lovely to see you again, Jenny. And in a week or two, I might give you a call. If it sounds like you're very busy, but I'd like to get back in touch.
Thank you, Richard. Cheers. And also thank you to Gemma, who's been joining us for the first time today and has to jump off. Thanks very much for coming, Gemma. We'll hope to see you next time. Sarah McPhee, did you have your hand up a moment ago?
Hi. No, I've just been trying to fix my microphone and getting into shambles, but I'm fixed now.
Fine. Lara, you posted some interesting stuff about transition streets and working together with neighbours. Would you? I could read out your thing, but I'd much rather hear it from you.
I suppose it's a little bit of a tangent away from the Chatty Cafe, because I think probably the thing about the Chatty Cafe is the informality, isn't it, and the no agenda, which is what makes that attractive. Having said that, I think some people like to have a focus to their activity or their meeting, and maybe wouldn't want to identify themselves as someone who's lonely either. So this is a really nice excuse to come together and get to know your neighbours, to make some positive changes in your own life, and also to support other people to make those changes too. And we started this, I think, in September last year, August or September last year, meeting every 2 weeks online. And I think we worked our way through the workbook, which was only meant to last for 7 sessions, but we all enjoyed it so much and got so much out of it, and obviously really appreciated getting to know our neighbours as well, especially when we couldn't go out and about and meet people as normal. So we've continued, and we actually, our neighbours take it in turns to host the meeting. They're very informal, but we pick a theme each time with a kind of environmental slant. So in the run up to Christmas, we did one on lower impact Christmas and reducing your carbon footprint and so on. Our next one next week is going to be on sanitary protection and nappies and what we can do in that respect. So each time we meet, there is a theme and a focus, but it's a really great way for just involving people and giving people a bit of ownership and feeling like they're making a difference, whether it's just changing their energy supplier or finding out about something that they didn't know about. And in February, on the back of that, we're going to have we're calling it Fix It February, and we're going to take that campaign online as well. We're going to have a tool trail for children to wander around the neighbourhood and find out about fixing things. And we're also going to share examples of things that we fixed or asked for help with fixing things as well, whether that's expertise or tools to do the task or whatever it is. So I think there's been some really nice spin-offs out of that. But the Transition Streets website has got lots of really useful resources if anyone's particularly interested in that. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. No, thank you, Lara. That's great. So just before we wind up, I've got a couple more things for future events to mention. Anything else for today? Anyone else would like to share? Ask. Okay. Well, there's a couple of things coming up in the future. The first of them is a session that's going to be run by Leah, who's on the call today, on host leading. And she's part of our host leading community that I do for my work, if you like. And that's on the 27th of January at 6 p.m. UK time. And it's a 2-hour session and it's free. And I've put the booking link in the chat. Leah, would you like to say just a little word about what you're hoping to do on that event? You'll have to unmute yourself first, though.
So it will be a 90-minute session.
90 minutes, okay.
Well. Yeah. So I reduced the session to 90 minutes. And it will be in content and structure, an introductory session to host leadership. Kind of thinking that not many people yet know the metaphor and the practices deriving from it. And in structure, it will be a mixture of talking about post leadership and inviting people to experience the metaphor, to experience the contemporary leadership challenges. And also what I like very much is there will be a thread from beginning to end. People will think of their own leadership challenge, current leadership challenge, and as we go, people will be adding to their notes about their own challenge, like giving it a name, placing it, when, where, when, with whom. And my hope is that towards the end of the session, they will have not really a plan, but a kind of roadmap of how they will address their challenge.
Excellent. So
this is what it will be like. It will be, I hope, very experiential rather than done in lecture.
But Grammarly can help. This sentence.
So thank you, Leah. So that's a great opportunity, folks. And if you, this idea of leading as a host is very central to my conception of how we become village builders. So there's a great opportunity there, free of charge. And the other thing is our next village in the city call, which is 4 weeks today. It's by Lara, with Lara Puttkammer from City Patery, which is a bit of a tongue twister. And she specializes in building participation in urban settings and urban projects. And she also runs the Urbanism Book Club, which tackles a book about cities every month. So very interesting young woman, and we're very delighted to be welcoming her. That's on the 10th of February, Wednesday the 10th of February, 4 p.m. Usual thing here. And of course it's free, and the booking link for that is also in the chat. And one other thing, we've had 2 or 3 villages sign up, put themselves on our map since the new year started, which is great. And Terry Sayers-Cooper from Eastbourne, Broderick Green Eastbourne, the newly titled Broderick Green Eastbourne is here on the call today. We have also a monthly kind of village builders call, which is not a public one, but if it's open to those who put their villages on the map. And so if you're interested, that'll be next Wednesday. So you're interested to get involved with that in a deeper way and share and learn together, then you can see how at the link I've just put in the chat about putting your village on the map. There's no cost. You can do it. You can just be yourself to start with. You don't need a team or anything. But it's a way, just a little kind of commitment to get involved a little bit more in the project. So I think we're winding up for today. I'd like to say a huge thank you to Jenny, who's been super helpful and super friendly and super informative about Chatty Cafe. Jenny, I hope that some interesting things will emerge from this, and all the best with the project as it goes on.
Oh, thank you. And thank you so much for inviting me.
That's a great pleasure. And thank you to you all for coming. And thank you to anyone who's watched the recording this far.
Thank you so much.
And thanks, Jodie. And I hope to see everybody. I'll stop the recording
Mark,
now.
I have a question.